Hello again. This video is going to be on Module 7, Biomechanics. And nothing better to do, but let's get it started. There we go. All right, biomechanics. Obviously, some kind of biomechanics and associated with the body. Makes sense, doesn't it? All right, let's go. The objective is to be able to describe the basic elements of biomechanics as they relate to the human body. I mean, let's face it, that's what ergonomics is all about, is the human body. Biomechanics is a study of forces on the human body. Any task can be described in terms of the specific movements and loading, both muscular and structural. Why is biomechanics important to ergonomics? Biomechanics is a useful tool in situations where lifting, pushing, or pulling is performed with or without a load. In certain body postures, the body's own weight creates postural stress. The goal of occupational biomechanics is to quantitatively describe the musculoskeletal loading that occurs during work in order to derive the degree of risk associated with that task. Think about it a minute. The goal of occupational biomechanics is to quantitatively. What's quantitatively as opposed to qualitatively? Qualitatively means is usually expressed in words like high or low or good or bad or a whole lot, where quantitatively is expressed in numbers like 27 or 52 or whatever. So quantitatively describe the musculoskeletal loading that occurs during work in order to derive the degree of risk associated with the task. The body is described as levers. A major assumption of occupational biomechanics is that the body behaves according to the laws of Newtonian mechanics. Movements in the body is produced by a system of levers. The levers work together to produce coordinated action. Some by actual movement, which is dynamic, and others by stabilization, which would be static. So if you think what we're going to look at is how the body is really composed of a lot of different levers and how they move and what the forces are. All right, I want to eat my calorie-free, soy-free, antibiotic-free, raw, non-GMO, organic, fat-free, low-carb dinner. Looks really good, doesn't it? All right, parts of a lever system. Fulcrum, that's the pivot about which a lever turns. In the human body, this is typically the joint center, the fulcrum. Lever is a rigid bar that turns about an axis of rotation or fulcrum. In the human body, this is typically a combination of body parts, a limb, for example. Lever arm is the distance from the fulcrum to either the load or the effort. So you have the load arm and the effort arm. So from the fulcrum to either one of those is the lever arm. And one thing you're going to find out in levers is there's a lot of different terms for these. They're the same thing, the same sciences behind it, but there's different terminologies for some of these things. Load in the human body, this can be the weight of the object in the hand as well as the limb weight. So load is sometimes called resistance. Effort is sometimes called force. In the human body, this is the force generated by the musculoskeletal system that is applied to cause movement against load and or to stabilize a joint. There are three classes of levers. First class lever, the load and the effort are at opposing ends of the lever, and the fulcrum is in the center. Example is a child's seesaw. Now, because the fulcrum is in the center doesn't mean it's dead in the center. It's just in between those two, the load and the effort. The load moves in opposite direction as effort. So in other words, if the effort goes up, the load goes down. Looks like a teeter-totter or a seesaw. A human example of that is the skull. It sits on the spine and moves up and down. Second class lever, the fulcrum and effort are at opposing ends of the lever, and the load is in the center. And the classic example of that is a wheelbarrow. The fulcrum is basically the wheel. The effort is your hands on the handles, and in the middle is that load. The load moves in the same direction as effort. When you lift up, the load lifts up, but less distance. The human example of that is the foot. Third class lever, the fulcrum and the load are at opposing ends of the lever, and the effort is in the center. For example, staple remover. Load moves in the same direction as effort, but more distance. The human example is an arm. In other words, on your arm, the fulcrum is your elbow. The effort is the bicep pulling your arm up, and the load is your arm itself plus whatever you have holding in it. So there you go. That's a first class lever. Fulcrum's in the center, the effort and load on each end of it. There you go. This is a first class idiots doing something here. That is just not really smart. People that age, you think by the time they achieve that age, would be a lot wiser than that. But not always happens. Let's look at it again. Some of those people are falling higher than them, so they're falling 7 or 8 feet. I don't know what the outcome of this was, but I bet it wasn't good for some of them. All right, second class lever. The load's in the middle. Fulcrum's at the end, effort's at the other end. Again, that's like a wheelbarrow. The fulcrum would be the wheels, loads the dirt or whatever's in the wheelbarrow, and the effort of your hands picking it up. So what do you give up on it? You give up distance. You pick that up a lot further. Your hands move, let's say 3 feet for the load to move, maybe 2 feet or 1 foot, but it works. Third class lever, the load is on one end, fulcrum's on the other, and the effort's in the middle. So what happens there is you gain, the load gains distance from the effort, but it takes a lot more effort. And that is found the most common one in the human body. And the most classic example of that is the human arm. And this just gives you another little depiction of it in the first, each of these levers is divided into 3. So in the first one on the upper left-hand corner, the fulcrum is in the middle, so it's balanced. Now, if you get down to where the fulcrum is off center, so there's 2/3 of it one way, then you need to have double the effort to balance the load. So that's just showing you that how the distance the fulcrum is off, how much effort will be needed for each of these situations. So let's just look at this for a minute. Assuming you have a 10-pound load, a 12-inch movement of the effort, and equal distance between the load, the fulcrum, and the effort. All right. So in the first class lever, 10 pounds. So the load, you're going to move the load 12 inches. So 10 pounds, the load's going to move 12 inches too, except it's going to go in the opposite direction of the effort. So, and then in the end, so again, is load, the fulcrum middle, and the effort on the other end. The second class lever, if you have a 5-pound effort, the load distance is going to move just 6 inches because you're moving at 12. You're moving at 12 inches, but it's 5 pounds. So it's only going to go up 6 inches. And in the third class lever, it's going to take 20 pounds of effort to move the load 24 inches in the same direction as the effort. So again, the fulcrum and the effort at the ends in the second class lever, and the fulcrum and load are at the ends in the third class lever. So the fulcrum's in the middle on the first class lever, and it's at one end on the other two. Biomechanical loads or stresses on the body are not defined purely by the magnitude of the weight or applied load. The position of the weight relative to the fulcrum or point rotation of the joint and direction of force defines the muscular effort required. So just because the load is 10 pounds doesn't mean it's going to take 10 pounds of effort to move it. In other words, the position of the weight relative to the fulcrum and the direction of force defines the muscular effort required. I'll go into that in more detail. For example, holding a 40-pound dumbbell does not produce 40 pounds of force on the elbow, nor does a bicep respond with 40 pounds of force. It does, however, create a tendency for the system to rotate, and those rotational forces are called moments. Merriam-Webster definition defines moments as the tendency or measure of tendency to produce motion, especially about a point or axis. The product of quantities such as force and the distance to a particular axis or point. The measure of a force's tendency to cause a body to rotate about a specific point, this is rotational force, is a moment. A moment is a vector quantity having both direction and magnitude. A moment is defined as a product of the applied force and the perpendicular distance, lever arm, through which the force is applied. The perpendicular distance between the fulcrum and the effort is the muscle effort lever arm. The perpendicular distance between the fulcrum and the load is the load lever arm. So again, you have lever arm defined here as the distance between the fulcrum and the load, or the fulcrum and the effort. Moments are commonly expressed in Newton meters. A Newton is a unit of force that takes mass into consideration. 1 Newton is equal to 0.225 pounds. Moments can also be expressed as inch pounds or foot pounds. Yes, I know I got hair on the couch. It's called furniture, isn't it? You can argue with that, dog? Again, more things on levers. First class lever, now you notice this one, they're calling it force, axis, and resistance. Get used to those terms because everybody's going to, not everybody, there are several different terms for each thing here. So designed for the balance, and believe me, that grotesque looking thing there is supposed to be the human skull. The head sitting on the cervical vertebrae. So force, axis, or fulcrum and resistance. Second class lever, axis, resistance, force. Ankle plantar flexors are the perfect example of a second class lever. There's excellent leverage so that the body is easily elevated with relatively little force generated by the plantar flexor of the calf. And the third class lever, designed for motion, the most common lever in the body because they favor large ranges of motion and for speed and distance. So there's your arm. You can see in the drawing above it where the effort is and the fulcrum is. The fulcrum is the elbow and the load. So it takes a lot more effort, but what do you gain? You're going to gain distance and speed on that end of it too. So that's 12 inches. The effort's applied, our force is applied here. So a moment of force equal weight times distance. The applied moment in this case is 40 pounds going 12 inches equal 480, not going 12 inches from the fulcrum is 480 inch-pounds. We're going to discount the weight of the arm itself in this thing, in this exercise. So muscle movement equal weight of the effort times distance of the effort. That's your 480 inch-pounds. Now, I'm going to take this times 0.5, which is half an inch is from the fulcrum to the where the muscle hits the lever arm, which is the arm. So it's going to take 960 pounds of effort to move that 40 pounds, 12 inches. So you can see that the human arm muscles have to generate one heck of a lot of effort to move something that's even just 40 pounds. And that's if it was half an inch. Now, if the muscle was 2 inches away from the elbow, which may be even more accurate, 240 pounds, but it's still quite a bit. It takes a lot of effort to hold or move that 40 pounds to 12 inches. Most of the joint rotations in the human body are third-class levers, which have the benefit of good range of motion, speed, and power, but large muscle forces are required to move even a small amount of weight. A first-class lever has the fulcrum in the middle, the load at one end, and the effort on the other. The skull is an example of a first-class lever in the body. The force is the center of gravity, and the skull located in the proximity of the chin. The fulcrum is the joint between the skull and the spine, and the effort is provided by the muscles in the head or neck that tilt the head. The muscles nor the load have the advantage there. Again, that's your first-class lever. So given the following, 18 pounds weight of the head, I don't know how you weigh somebody's head. I guess you weigh them and cut their head off and weigh what's left. Raising the chin 4 inches, distance from the back of the skull to the fulcrum is 4 inches. So the muscle moment is 18 times 4, 72. Of course, you're going to take divide it by the other 4, so it's still 18 pounds because they're the same distance, so it's the same amount of weight. A second-class lever has the fulcrum at one end, the muscle force or effort at the other, and the load between the two. The foot is a second-class lever. The ball of the foot's the fulcrum. The muscle force is applied by the calf muscle, and the load is the whole rest of the body. The muscle has the biomechanical advantage in this lever system due to the length of the lever arm. So there you go. That's the load here is your body, the lever here, the fulcrum here is the ball of your foot, and the effort is the muscles in your calf. Third-class lever has the fulcrum at one end, the load at the other, and the muscle force or effort between the two. The arm is a third-class lever. The elbow is the fulcrum. The muscle force is between the fulcrum and the load is whatever's being held in the hand, including the arm. But again, for the purposes of our math here, we're just going to ignore the weight of the arm itself. The muscle has the biomechanical disadvantage in this lever system due to the length of the load arm. The advantage is the distance of movement. So again, you're moving that lever, which is your arm, with the effort really close to the fulcrum. So you're going to get a big distance movement in a load because you really need to move your arm a lot of distance. So given the following, again, a 40-pound weight, distance from elbow fulcrum to muscle attachment, half an inch, and distance from fulcrum to the load, 12 inches. So the muscle movement is 40 times 12, it's 48 inch-pounds. Effort needed is 480 divided by 0.5. So again, 960 pounds, given those numbers there. So do you understand the concept when somebody says leverage? leverage is really just means that, like when you have a lever, you want to move something like a crowbar. When you're doing that, you're using leverage. So don't be too confused about these. Watch the other video that's in this same module, because it has some really good depictions of these concepts that might help you understand it. And some of the questions are in that video are on the test too. So, all right, have fun, and I'll catch you later. Bye.